The fact that he is willing to supply Korean soldiers for the purposes of Russia's war only just demonstrates that Russia is also needing to have auxiliary support because they are using mercenaries, they are using criminals from the prison system. There are the other entities of, there are even accusations that ordinary people who are going to Russia to study get frog-marched into the war itself. So this is just another example. But one really interesting dynamic to this, Henry, is that South Korea has been developing its weapons program, especially its armaments with tanks. They have not got involved in conflicts before, but they are now expressing concern about North Korean troops going into Ukraine. And there is now talk that they may actually start supplying Ukraine with weapons as a result of this.
Vladimir Putin, the president of Russia, has threatened to strike Kiev with ballistic missiles that he claims can't be shot down by any air defense system. It follows attacks on Ukraine's power grid, which has left more than 1 million households without electricity. Putin said it was a response to Ukraine's use of long-range US and UK weapons inside Russian territory.
Overnight, we carried out a comprehensive strike using 90 missiles and 100 drones. 17 targets were hit. These were military facilities, defence industry facilities, and their support systems. I repeat once again, these strikes from our side took place in response to the incessant strikes on Russian territory by American long-range missiles. As has been said many times, there will always be a response from our side.
Okay, President Putin in menacing mood there. Well, let's talk to Sajjan Gohel, who is the chair of the Nato counter-terrorism advisory group. It's being ramped up. Sajjan, good evening to you.
Good evening, Henry.
Good evening. Okay, so what to make of this? He's saying that we will always strike back, and on this occasion, with ballistic missiles that cannot be shot down by any air defense system. Those people who said a week or so ago that Putin was bluffing, maybe they need to think again. What do you say?
Well, in Putin's view, he uses these threats as an instrument of deterrence as well as psychological warfare. It's calculated to pressure his opponents whilst also trying to show that he retains huge control over the war in Ukraine. Ultimately, Putin is a bully. He's going to continue to saber rattle from time to time. That doesn't mean that we dismiss the threat. The fact is the war has been ongoing. But this is a man that is willing to sacrifice tens of thousands of his own troops, let alone anyone in Ukraine or beyond that. So that is the problem, is that for him, the ability to continue the war and the conflict, it seems to be relentless.
Yeah, we've been reporting those huge aerial attacks overnight by Russia on Ukraine's energy infrastructure, and millions are without power across the country. The question is what Putin's aim is, given that Biden and Macron, and perhaps our own Keir Starmer, are going to increase the supply of long-range weapons to the Ukrainians and ramp up between now and January the 20th when Donald Trump takes over. What's the Putin calculation? Because Sajjan, I should add this, he has praised Donald Trump, calling him an intelligent guy, calling him a brave guy, and essentially trusting him on this issue.
This is, again, part of the psychological operations that Putin very much engages in. He likes to gaslight. He also is very good at trying to create internal divisions, picking on the ideological divides that exist within countries itself. His goal is to continue the war for as long as possible in the hope that the West loses interest or the West can no longer continue to rearm, resupply Ukraine, and then also the financial cost of that as well. There is this perception in Russia that somehow Donald Trump's administration will look at things differently, but I think that is still speculative. There is hope within the NATO countries and also even within the US that when Donald Trump takes office, he will be able to see the evidence, the intelligence to show what Russia's long-term agenda has been, and that it's not a country that is necessarily going to be that easy to negotiate with without everyone having to sacrifice Ukrainian territory for Putin's own agenda.
Mm-hmm. And how do you think the Ukrainians could or should respond to Putin's latest threat to strike, and I quote, decision-making centres. Does that mean the presidential palace or office, or indeed the parliament in Kiev, with Moscow's new intermediate range ballistic missiles? There are going to be some in Ukraine who will, around the president, perhaps, who will want to dial things down, but others who will say, go for broke.
It is proving to be a real challenge because we are seeing more Russian strikes in urban centers of Ukraine. It is causing a lot of problems, power shortages, water supply issues, infrastructure damage. It is very significant. And Ukraine, of course, is also losing a lot of troops on the front line of this war. So it is a huge challenge for the country. But this is also a country that has had to really endure problems, not just since February of 2022 when the war started, but go all the way back to when Russia seized control of the Crimea, then occupying the Donbass region. So Ukraine has resilience, and in many ways they are also dependent on the West continuing to support them financially and with military assistance. And without that, that would certainly cripple Ukraine's ability to continue to fight this war.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think of the involvement of North Korea? And there's talk of 10,000 troops, perhaps more. How do you think they are being used, or indeed are going to be used in the coming weeks?
It's a very disturbing development because North Korea is a hermit kingdom, effectively run by Kim Jong-un. He himself is isolated from many countries in the world. He also uses the nuclear weapons blackmailing tactic. He has intimidated and bullied the neighboring countries like South Korea and Japan. So effectively, Kim Jong-un and Putin, birds of a feather, seem to be flocking together. And the fact that he is willing to supply Korean soldiers for the purposes of Russia's war only just demonstrates that Russia is also needing to have auxiliary support because they are using mercenaries, they are using criminals from the prison system. There are the other entities of, there are even accusations that ordinary people who are going to Russia to study get frog-marched into the war itself. So this is just another example. But one really interesting dynamic to this, Henry, is that South Korea has been developing its weapons program, especially its armaments with tanks. They have not got involved in conflicts before, but they are now expressing concern about North Korean troops going into Ukraine. And there is now talk that they may actually start supplying Ukraine with weapons as a result of this.
Wow, then it becomes a conflict with many more active partners, and this would be quite serious, wouldn't it, Sajjan?
Well, it certainly is proliferating. It is a situation that is not just within Ukraine's borders. It is a conflict that has involved many different actors. Belarus, which is a very close ally of Putin, they have acted as a support base and a supply line for Russia. You've also got countries like Syria, which owe their dependency to Russia, especially Bashar al-Assad, who would have probably been removed during the Arab Spring if it had not been for Russia. So he himself has been providing support. And then you've got the groups like the mercenary outfits like the Wagner Group, which operates in parts of Africa and have committed terrible, egregious human rights abuses that have been involved in assisting this war and this conflict as well. So there's so many different entities and actors involved in this. And ultimately, this does come down to Vladimir Putin. What does he want to do? How long is he going to continue this? How long is he going to continue sacrificing his own people in this war where they are occupying Ukrainian territory?
All right. Sajjan Gohel, chair of the NATO counter-terrorism advisory group, thank you very much indeed for joining us.